Nearly 1 in 5 American adults has taken a weight loss shot. Millions more are waiting for their prescription. And 2/3 of the weight comes back within a year of quitting. That isn't the drug failing. That's your biology winning. I'm Sophia Hart. I read the trials so you don't have to, and I tell you what the numbers actually mean for a body over 40. So let's start with where you probably are. Maybe you're already on one of these injections. The hunger went quiet. For the first time in a decade, food stopped being an argument you lose every night at 9 o'clock. And underneath that relief sits a question you haven't said out loud. What happens when I stop? Or maybe you're not on it, but your sister is, your coworker is. A woman at church dropped 40 pounds and won't say how. And you're facing a decision that runs 4 figures a year, with nothing to guide you but headlines. Either way, you're not at the margins of this story. You're in the middle of it. Here's the number that stopped me. Among American adults between 50 and 64, nearly 1 in 3 has taken one of these medications. Not 1 in 30, 1 in 3. That's the exact stretch of life where the metabolic ground shifts under your feet, and the stretch reaching for the needle hardest. And among those who haven't tried yet, but who've been told by a physician they're carrying extra weight, more than 4 in 10 want to start. That's from a national health tracking survey published in late 2025. So this isn't a fringe conversation, this is your street. Now hear the next part carefully, because it's the reason this video exists. These drugs work. I won't spend 20 minutes tearing them down. That would be dishonest, and you'd be right to close the tab. In the largest trial of semaglutide, the compound marketed as Ozempic for blood sugar and Wegovy for weight, participants lost close to 15% of their body weight in 68 weeks. 15%. Outside of surgery, nothing in the history of weight management has done that. But the trial didn't stop at 68 weeks. Researchers followed those same participants for 1 more year after the injections ended. Within 12 months, roughly 2/3 of everything they'd lost had come back. Blood sugar drifted up, cholesterol drifted up. Every marker that had improved so beautifully turned around and walked quietly back toward where it started. That follow-up was published in 2022 by Professor John Wilding's team in a peer-reviewed journal of diabetes and metabolic medicine. Nobody buried that finding. It wasn't leaked. It sat in plain sight, inside the very same research that made these medications famous. It just never makes it into the commercial. So sit with what that study showed. Those participants didn't get lazy in month 69. They didn't lose their nerve. They stopped taking a molecule, and their bodies did precisely what 100,000 years of engineering built them to do. They took the weight back. If you've ever lost weight, watched it return, and concluded the failure was somewhere inside your character, let that go. Not as comfort, as accuracy. This isn't your fault. It never was. But it is a system, and a system can be understood. Here's the part almost nobody explains. That injection isn't foreign. Glucagon-like peptide 1 is a hormone your own gut already makes, released every time you eat. The medication is a copy of it, redesigned to survive in your bloodstream for days instead of minutes. Which raises a question worth 20 minutes of your evening. If the drug only amplifies a signal your body already sends, why does the weight come roaring back the moment you stop sending it? Stick with me. In a few minutes, I'll show you the one measurement from that follow-up research that predicts, with uncomfortable accuracy, how much weight comes back, and it has nothing to do with how disciplined you were. And there's a second cost. This one never shows up on the scale. In fact, the scale applauds it. We'll get there. Let's answer the question I left you with. Your body does not want you to lose weight. I know how that sounds, like a comfortable story, like something you'd tell yourself at midnight with the refrigerator door open. But it isn't a story. It's been measured. Let me walk you through one of those measurements. Start with the thermostat in your hallway. Set it to 70 degrees, and it defends 70 degrees. Open a window in January, and the furnace doesn't shrug, it fights. The harder you push the room away, the harder it works to drag it back. Your body runs a thermostat too. It just isn't set to temperature. It's set to weight. That control panel sits in a region of your brain called the hypothalamus, a structure about the size of an almond, doing arithmetic you'll never be conscious of. It takes readings from two chemical messengers. The first is leptin. Your fat cells release it, and its message is simple. There's plenty here, stop hunting. The second is ghrelin, from an empty stomach. Its message is the opposite, and it's louder. Something is wrong, go find food. So what happens to those two signals after you lose weight? In 2011, a team led by Priya Sumitran at the University of Melbourne enrolled 50 adults carrying excess weight and put them through a supervised 10-week program of steep calorie restriction. They each lost around 30 pounds. Real result. Then the researchers did the thing almost nobody bothers to do. They kept measuring. At 10 weeks, the hunger messenger had risen. The satiety messenger had collapsed. Textbook. Here's what wasn't. 14 months later, more than a year after the weight loss ended, that fullness signal still sat about 35% below where it began. Hunger was still elevated. And when researchers asked those participants how hungry they felt, the answer had never once returned to baseline. Not at 3 months, not at 6, not at 14. Their bodies had not accepted the new weight. They were still campaigning every hour of every day to undo it. That work was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now notice what's missing from that study. There was no injection anywhere in it, no pen, no prescription. Not one participant was on medication for weight. This is simply what a human body does after losing weight, by any method. Which reframes the entire conversation. The weekly compound isn't repairing that system. It never claimed to. It outshouts it. It floods the same channels your gut hormone travels, at concentrations your own biology could never produce, for days at a stretch instead of minutes. It doesn't turn the thermostat down. It stands next to it and yells over it. And it works. Beautifully. For as long as the yelling continues. Then you stop. The yelling stops. The control panel is still set exactly where it always was, except now the distance between where you're standing and where your body believes you belong is wider than it's ever been. And every mechanism built to close that gap switches on at once. Sharper appetite, slower burn, a quieter urge to move that you'll simply experience as being tired. You won't feel that as biology, you'll feel it as weakness. That's the cruelest part of the design. Let me be careful here because I know where a video like this usually goes next, and I'm not going there. None of this makes these medications bad. None of it makes them a trick. It makes them a treatment for a chronic condition, the way blood pressure medication is. Nobody is shocked when blood pressure climbs after someone stops their pills. Nobody calls that a moral failure. We just haven't extended body weight the same courtesy. But here's the piece that keeps me up at night. Not everyone regains. In that same follow-up research, a minority held on to most of what they lost. Same molecule, same dose, same 12 months without it. Something separated them. So what separated them? It wasn't grit. It wasn't a morning routine. It wasn't some quiet reserve of character that half the group had and the other half didn't. The researchers ran the subgroups, and the strongest predictor of how much weight came back was this: how much weight you lost in the first place. Read that again, because it does something strange to your understanding of the last 20 years of your life. The people who responded best, the ones whose bodies gave up the most, regained the most. Not because they got sloppy, because they'd opened the widest gap. Go back to the hallway. The further you drag the room from where the dial is set, the harder the furnace roars when you finally stop holding the window shut. Nobody in that room lacked discipline. The room simply had a setting, and the setting never moved. So the measurement that predicts your regain isn't in your character. It's on the scale, in the week you were proudest of it. Now, before you spiral, here's the other half of that finding, and it almost never gets quoted. Those participants still ended up ahead. 2 full years after their last injection, the group was still carrying meaningfully less weight than when they started. Almost half still held a reduction their physicians would call clinically significant. The rebound was real. The rebound was not total. The floor they landed on was higher than the floor they started from. That's the sentence I'd want somebody to say to me. The weight came back. It did not come all the way back. And if you're finding this useful, if this is the version of the conversation you wish somebody had handed you before the first appointment, subscribe. Not to help me, because I'm going to keep making these, and you're clearly the person I'm making them for. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. You're probably already writing the ending to this story in your head. It goes something like, fine, so you use the medication to lose it, and you keep the habits, and the habits hold the line. That story has been tested, directly. In 2021, Dr. Domenica Rubino and her colleagues published a trial in the Journal of the American Medical Association built to ask exactly that. 800 adults spent 20 weeks on the weekly injection. Then some quietly kept going, and the rest were switched to an inactive substitute, a placebo, without knowing which they'd received. Both groups kept everything else: the structured support, the nutrition guidance, the movement plan. Nothing about their behavior changed. Over the next 11 months, the group that continued the medication lost another 8% of their body weight. The group on the substitute gained back nearly 7%. Same habits, same coaching, same people. The only variable that moved was whether a signal was still arriving in the brain, and the second group's bodies began, immediately and quietly, taking the weight back. Sit with that, because it dismantles something you've been told your entire adult life. The habits were not the thing holding the weight off. The habits were riding on top of the thing holding the weight off. Now, hear me clearly. I am not telling you to stay on any medication. I am not telling you to come off one. Those decisions belong to you and the physician who knows your history, and anyone on the internet who tells you otherwise is selling something. What I'm telling you is that this class of drugs behaves like a treatment for a chronic condition, not a course of antibiotics, not a semester abroad, and most people walk into that first appointment believing the opposite. But there's something else in that regain, something the scale is structurally incapable of showing you, because what comes back is not what left. When you lose weight, you don't only lose fat. You never have. Nobody ever has. Step onto a scale and it gives you one number. And that number is the sum of everything you're made of: fat, bone, water, organs, and the muscle wrapped around your skeleton that carries you up a flight of stairs. The scale cannot tell those apart. It never could. So let's ask the question it can't answer. Of the weight that comes off with these medications, how much is the tissue you actually want to keep? The honest answer is a range, and I'm going to give you the whole range rather than the scary end of it. In the trials of tirzepatide, the dual-action compound sold as Mounjaro and Zepbound, roughly a quarter of the total weight lost was lean mass. In some analyses of the older weekly injection, that fraction ran considerably higher. A review published in the journal Circulation in 2024 put it as high as 4 in every 10 pounds, a quarter, sometimes closer to half. Now stay with me, because here's what the frightening headlines leave out. That's roughly what happens whenever anyone loses a significant amount of weight, by any route: surgery, steep restriction, illness. It isn't a poison unique to these drugs. And because fat sheds faster than tissue, most people finish treatment with a better ratio of muscle to fat than they had walking in. On paper, their body composition improved. So far, so reassuring. Here's where it stops. At Wake Forest University School of Medicine, Kristen Beavers and her colleagues followed 78 women after menopause through weight loss, and then through the year that followed. They measured what came off. Then they measured what came back. During the loss, for every pound of fat these women shed, they gave up about a quarter pound of muscle. During the regain, for every pound of fat that returned, only about an eighth of a pound of muscle came with it. Read those two sentences next to each other. The fat comes home, the muscle sends a postcard. That work was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and it reframes everything we've discussed. Because if you lose weight and it returns, and by now you know that returning is the default, not the exception, you don't arrive back where you started. You arrive at your old weight wearing a different body. Same number on the scale, less engine underneath it. And you need to know what that engine does, because our culture spent 40 years talking about muscle as if it were decoration. It isn't. Skeletal muscle is the largest site in your body for pulling sugar out of your bloodstream and putting it somewhere useful. It burns fuel while you sleep. It's the strongest physical predictor of whether you'll be climbing your own stairs at 80. There's a clinical name for the erosion of that tissue with age: sarcopenia. It arrives on its own schedule regardless of what you weigh, and it accelerates after 50. So picture the arithmetic across 2 cycles. Lose 30 pounds, give up 8 of muscle. Regain 25, take back 3. Do that twice in a decade, and that isn't hypothetical. That's the lived experience of millions of American adults. And the scale will tell you almost nothing happened. Your body will know exactly what happened. This is why I won't make a video that ends in either applause or panic. The medication isn't villainous. The regain isn't a moral event. But the transaction is real, and almost nobody is quoted the full price before they sign. And there's one more line on that invoice. Because everything I've described came from clinical trials, from people monitored, coached, dosed on schedule, measured every few weeks by a research team. That is not how these medications are being taken in the real world. And the gap between those 2 rooms is far wider than you'd expect. Picture the person in that trial. Someone calls them. Their medication arrives, free. A nurse walks them through raising the dose slowly enough that their stomach adapts. If they feel awful, there's a number to dial, and somebody answers. Every few weeks, a research team weighs them, measures them, writes it down. Now picture you. You have a prescription, a pharmacy that may or may not have it in stock, an insurance plan that changes its mind in January, and a follow-up appointment 11 weeks from Thursday. These are not the same experiment, and the results are not the same either. In a study of 125,000 American adults starting these medications, drawn from national health records, the average person who eventually quit had lost around 8% of their body weight before doing so. 8, not 17. Roughly half the result the trials reported. Same medications, same doses, same country. And here's the number that should be on every consultation room wall. Among adults taking these drugs who did not have type 2 diabetes, nearly 65% had stopped within 12 months. 65% in 1 year. Which forces me to correct something you may have taken from earlier in this video. That rebound figure I opened with? It described people who finished 68 weeks, who reached the full dose, who never missed a shipment. Most people never get there. The rebound the research warns you about is happening to a population that, statistically, isn't you. Why do people stop? It isn't nausea, though nausea is common. Gastrointestinal upset shows up in roughly half of trial participants, and it sends a smaller group walking. The dominant reason is money. More than half of adults using these medications say affording them is difficult. Not inconvenient, difficult. When people quit, cost is the reason they name first, ahead of side effects, ahead of everything. Which produces one of the strangest features of this entire era of medicine. We built a treatment that works, that must be continued to keep working, and we priced it so that continuing is the part most people can't do. That desperation has grown a second market. Copies mixed outside the standard supply chain, sold with a wink. I won't tell you where to find them. I'll tell you what regulators have documented instead. Dosing errors, in both directions, some serious enough to send people to emergency rooms. You aren't qualified to verify what's in that vial. Neither am I. Now let me hand you the reassurance you've earned by staying this long. At the Cleveland Clinic, researcher Hamlet Gasoyan and his colleagues followed nearly 8,000 adults who stopped these medications in ordinary practice, not in a trial. They tracked them for a year afterward. 45% of those treated for obesity either held steady or kept losing, not a collapse. Nearly half held the line. Their explanation is worth hearing. Many restarted the medication later, or moved to a different treatment, or built something around themselves that carried the load when the injection stopped carrying it. That work was published earlier this year in a journal of diabetes and metabolic research. So the honest picture is neither of the stories you've been sold. It is not a miracle you take for a season and graduate from. It is also not a trap that steals your muscle and hands your body back to you broken. It's a powerful, expensive, imperfect tool acting on a biological system most people have never had explained to them until, I hope, the last 20 minutes. Which leaves the only question that actually matters. If the drugs quiet the alarm but don't reset the setting, and if stopping is the norm rather than the exception, what does the research say you can do, before, during, or entirely without any prescription, to move that setting yourself? There are 3 things. They aren't secrets, they're just never in the headline. 3 things. And let me be precise about what I'm doing here, because precision is the whole reason you're still watching. I won't tell you to take anything, swallow anything, or stop anything. I'll tell you what appeared in the research, in trials, in people. What you do with it belongs to you and the physician who knows your history. The first thing is strength. In Copenhagen, a team led by Signe Torikov ran a trial most researchers never bother to run because it's expensive and it takes a year. They took nearly 200 adults who had already lost significant weight and split them 4 ways. One group exercised, one received liraglutide, an earlier drug in this same family. One did both, one did neither. A year later, everyone who did something was ahead of the group that did nothing. That group had begun climbing back. But the group combining movement with the medication came out furthest ahead, cutting their fat percentage roughly 4 points deeper than either strategy managed alone. Read that carefully. Same medication, same year. The people who trained didn't just keep more weight off, they kept a different body. That trial was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Exercise is not how you lose weight. It never was, and every honest researcher will tell you so. Exercise is how you decide what kind of weight leaves and what kind stays. The second thing is what you build with. Every trial that managed to protect muscle during weight loss did the same unglamorous thing. Participants ate meaningfully more protein than the standard reference intake and spread it across the day instead of stacking it into one evening meal. Tissue can't be built from material that isn't there. That's not a supplement pitch. I don't sell anything. It's what the successful studies had in common. The third thing is the one nobody expects. At the University of Chicago, researchers ran a beautifully cruel little experiment. They took overweight adults, put everyone into the same modest calorie deficit, and changed exactly one variable. Half slept 8.5 hours, half slept 5.5. Both groups lost the same amount of weight. But in the sleep-deprived group, the fraction of that loss coming from fat dropped by more than half, and the loss of fat-free tissue rose by 60%. Same food, same deficit, same scale reading, radically different body underneath. And those hunger signals from earlier? In the short sleep group, they climbed. Appetite rose. Their metabolism shifted toward burning less fat. That study appeared in the Annals of Internal Medicine. So when someone tells you weight is arithmetic, calories in, calories out, hand them that trial. Same arithmetic, 2 different bodies. The variable was a bedroom. Now the thing I've been building toward for 20 minutes. I opened by telling you that when the weight comes back, that isn't the drug failing. That's your biology winning. I meant it. Hear what it actually implies. Your body will always win an argument. It's older than you, smarter than your willpower, and it has never once been persuaded by shame. You cannot out-discipline it. Every approach that told you otherwise was wrong, and some part of you has known that for years. But a system that always wins can still be negotiated with, not defeated, negotiated with. Strength changes what your body is willing to release. What you eat changes what it has to work with. Sleep changes how loudly it argues. And for some people, a medication lowers the volume of the alarm long enough for the rest to take hold. None of that is a moral test. It never was. If you want research pulled apart and explained before it gets flattened into a headline, subscribe. And put your question in the comments, the thing you actually want to understand next. I read every one of them, and the ones that keep repeating become the next video. You were never lazy. You were negotiating with a system nobody bothered to describe to you. Now you've seen it. Next week, more studies nobody quoted, more things nobody explained. I'll see you there.